Welcome to Careers in Discovery, your window into the world of biotech leaders. On each episode, we interview the industry's leading executives to understand how they built their careers, what they've learned along the way, and the advice they'd give to their younger selves.
What does it take to build a biotech from scratch, with no data, no academic spinout, and nothing but two founders and two laptops? In this episode of Careers in Discovery, we're joined by Federico Paoletti, CEO and co-founder of Exogene, to find out. Federico shares the story of how he went from a PhD in cancer biology to co-founding an Oxford-based immuno-oncology biotech, working at the intersection of AI and protein engineering to develop personalised T-cell engager therapies. He talks about why he left academia despite loving science, what high agency really means in a biotech startup, how to win partnerships, funding and talent with no track record, and how curiosity and trust shaped Exogene's culture from the very beginning. If you're thinking about the leap into biotech entrepreneurship, or flexing your leadership muscle in a startup setting, Federico's journey will inspire you to go after the bold ideas and find the people who will build them with you. Welcome back to Careers in Discovery. I'm here today with Federico Paoletti from Exogene. Welcome to the podcast, Federico.
Yeah, great to be here, Tyler. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. And so, you know, I'm really excited to get into the kind of the conversation today, talk more about your career. We often start about what things are going on at the moment in your current company, so Exogene. I think people may have noticed recently, obviously you've opened crowdfunding and some other exciting announcements have happened through Exogene. But yeah, please do tell me more about what's going on at the moment.
Yeah, sure. So just to give you an overview, we are an Oxford-based biotech. We're developing new immunotherapies for cancer. And specifically, we focus on what are called T-cell engager drugs. So these are kind of protein drugs that can recruit immune cells to cancer sites and enable them to kill the cancer cells.
Okay.
So very kind of promising novel type of drug. And in the last, I would say 3-4 years, we've been really working on building up our discovery platform, which is really a combination of AI and a high throughput lab method to validate and test drug candidates. Really kind of our long-term vision beyond traditional drugs, which is something we've really, I would say, developed in the last 6 to 12 months, is to eventually create personalized immunotherapy cocktails where we are not just targeting one type of cancer cell, like traditional drugs, going after one target and only killing a fraction of the cancer cells. But in this case, we want to unlock the ability to develop personalized cocktails of drugs that could eliminate all cancer cells in a tumor and eventually offer the potential for a long-lasting cure.
Fantastic. No, that sounds really exciting, particularly coming through almost a unique modality there you're creating. What's the immediate focus for you at the moment at Exogene?
So now we're really focusing on advancing, let's say, our lead asset.
Okay.
Focusing on a very like a single target validated cancer antigen, with kind of the immediate milestone to essentially partner it out before clinical trials. And that will enable us to not just validate our technology platform, but also raise the sufficient capital to then move closer towards that vision, which is to really unlock this personalized T-cell engager cocktail vision.
Take me back to kind of when you were young, when you first started, maybe building your interest in science as a whole. Was there kind of a pivotal moment for you that made you decide, a career in life sciences is where I want to go?
Yeah, that's a great question. I kind of always grew up in an environment that stimulated curiosity, first of all. I grew up, so I'm the son of a journalist and of an engineer. So very important to ask a lot of questions about how the world works, but also, with a scientific mindset, which means, you kind of come up with a hypothesis, test it, and if it doesn't work, you move on. So I was never someone to be married to specific ways of thinking or ways of seeing the world. And I also had a lot of medical doctors in the family, so I somehow naturally gravitated towards biology. And initially, I wanted to be a professor, 100% wanted to be an academic professor. I moved to the UK actually to study genetics, and then I did a PhD in cancer research. But I would say towards the end of my PhD, I really realized that I didn't enjoy the actual lab work. So doing experiments, it just wasn't my thing, to be honest.
Yeah.
I was pretty good at it, but honestly, it felt far too repetitive and not intellectually stimulating. And I also, unfortunately, I also felt that it was hard to see the translational value of what I was doing. Well, what was this going to have any impact in real life, and would it help patients in any way? This was kind of unclear. It was very kind of foundational science.
Right.
And and then, I'm immediately out of my PhD, or shortly after, I started Exogene. So I joined a startup accelerator called Entrepreneur First. And that's where I met my co-founder, Andrea, he's a computer scientist. And funny enough, when we met, so he didn't know anything really about biology. He didn't know what a gene was. I had a vague idea of what immunotherapy was. So we really started completely from scratch, from an idea of, okay, how can we radically improve the discovery of these T-cell engager-based drugs, and then eventually kind of leverage AI to invent maybe a new class of medicine that is currently not even feasible. Hence the cocktail long-term vision of cocktail drugs. And I think the key determinant there was meeting someone that was not just complementary in terms of skill sets, but was very open to kind of the cross-pollination. So sure. I learned so much from my co-founder in terms, of course, of machine learning and AI. Andrea learned everything about biology through me initially. And I think we had, there was kind of two things that also represent the foundation of Exogene, which is we've always been very high agency people. So both Andrea and I, we grew up in Southern Europe, and in growing up in Italy, you realize that you need to hustle to get ahead in life, much more so than in other places in Europe. And I think this naturally kind of gave us this mindset of just doing things and finding a way to, for example, find early backers when we didn't have any data back in 2020.
Yeah.
And then building our first collaborations. And I think also one of the things that was really foundational was the fact that we were never afraid to say, hey, I actually have no idea what this means. Can you explain it to me in simple terms? Of course, I had relatively a limited understanding of machine learning. I understood mathematical modeling, but I didn't know much about it. Similarly, he didn't know much about biology. So we were not shy when asking each other questions. Right. And this is something that in a way has fed into, I think, the culture at Exogene, to don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to put your best foot forward and, challenge the status quo. And everyone will be quite receptive to that because we're a very interdisciplinary team. So there are no dumb questions.
Absolutely. No, thank you for kind of talking me through that process as well. I think there were lots of elements there that I picked up that I think would be particularly interesting to dive into more.
Definitely.
One of the key things that really stood out to me, though, and it was one of the first things you mentioned, was that element of curiosity. You know, that's kind of what started it for you, and almost through every step there, that has been a key element to how you've been able to develop onto your next major milestone, through developing either with Exogene or through your career. What kind of environment did you see as really engaging for you to be able to fully dive into that element of curiosity and be able to figure things out, give yourself that enough space to learn without kind of also not hiding yourself from a path, in a sense?
That's a good question. It's something that as I kind of hinted at, I think I've been personally lucky because I've always been in an environment that somehow stimulated curiosity. At the dinner table, growing up, we always had debates, whether it was about science or politics or history. This is just it was always my bread and butter. And also the friendship groups that I developed, somehow I was always surrounded by these kinds of people, not just high agency, but high curiosity. And that proceeded into university. And then it really peaked, of course, in the Startup Accelerator, because of course they select for people that are kind of very motivated, but also very open-minded. And that was how I met, and how we came to that. And of course, we started Exogene from scratch, so we were not a spin-off, and so the amount of hustling you need to do to start out is 10x more than when you're more of a traditional spin-off where you have a data package and an asset or a platform.
I'd love for you to tell me a little bit more about that as well, because that is a key difference between how lots of other biotech startup either spinning out. But what did that look like for you, step by step? What was the hustle? What were the kind of conversations that you had to have?
Yeah. So, for example, on the investor side, initially we really didn't know how to pitch. We barely knew how to prepare a deck, and what we did was we usually did small batches of pitches. So for example, 7 or 8 pitches, and we took notes, and then we often reflected on what we did well and what could have been improved based on that pitch, and then we iterated. So that's how we realized how to build a good one-liner, a good summary, a good clear pitch deck. And then slowly we started realizing also that, again, through having infinite number of conversations with founders and investors and not being shy to ask for their time, we realized that a lot of fundraising has to do with just the character and being yourself and having a bold vision, especially at the early stages of investing, where yes, maybe you have some data, but you're 1% there, and it's all about are you an animal? Are you ready to go out there and do whatever it takes? And I think then we also started proving that. For example, we built an initial paid collaboration with a pretty big biotech in the Oxford area, with nothing really, just with an idea. We were 2 guys and 2 laptops, and we found a warm intro into their scientific team, and we built kind of trust and interest, and through that we managed to get a revenue generating an exploratory proof of concept collaboration, which was incredibly validating, and then enabled us in a way to raise our first amount, our first kind of fundraising round.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess at that point, it's almost selling yourself as much as your vision and what you're doing, right? When it is just, as you mentioned, 2 people and 2 laptops.
Especially in the beginning, it's selling your credibility. And initially in these conversations, when we were at the beginning, like I would say, we were meeting with the top business people and like pretty senior scientists, and there was a lot of jargon being thrown around in these conversations. And I mean, I would say in the first calls, I would understand maybe 60% of the jargon, and Andrea understood maybe 5%. So we really had to intensely debrief after those first meetings to kind of catch up as well, and not forget, okay, this is our goal. We want to get them excited about what we're proposing and get some initial buy-in, and eventually get this to convert into some kind of contract.
Yeah, absolutely. And take me back that one step further. So one of the things that I'm fascinated about is, as you mentioned, it's from ideation. You step into Entrepreneurs First, you've got a blank page, and now you're set off to develop what was to come as Exogene. What's that process of having that blank page and being able to start something? Can you talk me through that?
Oh yeah, for sure. So I think I had like 2 or 3 ideas coming into this accelerator. But by the way, this was probably like five years ago now.
Yep.
But coming into the accelerator, I would say 2 or 3 ideas of what might be valuable to build. Turns out they were all kind of probably bad ideas, and Andrea also had some initial kind of ideas which we pretty quickly discarded. And the process there, which to their credit, I think they do a good job at promoting, which is always try to get some kind of market feedback as quickly as possible.
Right.
It's a lot easier, of course, in the world of tech, where maybe you build some software product, and does it sell? Does it not sell? What does the end user say? In biotech, it's a little bit more nuanced, because you need to you can't really talk to the patients, and it's really hard to talk to the really senior executives in pharma companies, because you're a nobody. So initially we were focusing on kind of biotechs that were hungry for a specific kind of problem, or let's say a specific solution for the kind of preclinical discovery process, which kind of seemed much more feasible to us to tackle initially. Right. And I would say it was just constant iteration, constantly talking to people in biotech and pharma, and understanding where the value was. So initially, in the very beginning, we thought we were going to be a software company developing some kind of algorithm to improve, let's say, the discovery of T-cell receptor-based drugs. Well, it turns out that market is far too small. There just aren't enough companies. And so then once we came to that realization, we understood that, well, the most of the assets, of course, in biotech is in the assets, in the drugs themselves. So what would be more valuable is that we build a comprehensive discovery platform to find better assets and then commercialize that. And maybe that brings me a little bit more towards the late, let's say the last 12 months, where we went to San Francisco to pitch, to fundraise earlier this year, and that was when the stock market collapsed. So that was when Trump announced the this very comprehensive tariff program, right?
Right. Okay.
So the stock market collapsed. VCs shut their doors, at least temporarily. And when we were pitching our kind of, let's say, relatively conventional vision, which is, okay, we have this great platform, we're going to develop these assets, cool. It really didn't stick, especially with the West Coast VCs, which are much more kind of, let's say, unconventional and vision driven. And so that kind of struggle there really pushed us to think hard about what our technology platform can really unlock that currently doesn't exist and would be transformational for patients.
Okay.
And hence this idea of, okay, in the short term, we should develop single target drugs that are best in class. Great. That will give us commercial validation. But in the long term, cancer has this problem that you can't, most drugs, they just shrink tumors because they only go after one cancer target. And eventually the tumor grows back and metastasizes and a patient dies. And so we hypothesized that with our technology, eventually we'll be able to develop cocktails of T-cell engager drugs. So going after multiple cancer targets at the same time, and therefore potentially eradicating the cancer. So offering that potential for a cure. So it's a constant,
Wow.
It's really a constant iteration, right? I just wanted to bring it back to kind of the present, to give more context also on where we are.
Yeah, for sure. And it follows the same line, right, doesn't it? It's almost that evolution of questioning, constantly looking for what next, how can that add that element of purpose. I know you mentioned at the moment as well within Exogene, that's a culture you've really been able to kind of create there, is that, culture of questioning. How do you build that from the start? And that seems to have had a real great impact on how you've developed as the company.
Oh, that's a good question. I think ultimately the founders set the tone, and the way Andrea and I interact, and how we learn from each other, I think that sets the tone for like the key kind of cultural pillars. But if I could say, let's also that how we select people and how we recruit people, beyond of course the technical skills, there's, I would say, 2 or 3 elements that we really look for, which is, so number one, you really need to be hungry to build. You need to have initiative and, as some people say, high agency, right? So the belief that your work will be impactful, because otherwise, then kind of it becomes difficult to navigate the ups and downs of a startup.
Sure.
And maybe 2 other things, which is one, of course, curiosity. So I want people to ask us questions, not just about what we're doing, but how, like, be aware of the wider technology and biotech and market trends, because we need to be able to bring in and put our work in the context of the wider kind of world and where medicine is going in the geopolitical climate. And the other element is the final element is more about character. So you can be, of course, really ambitious and driven, but if we can't trust you, then that's a huge problem. So we need to have this sense that you're a very trustworthy person. And so I think these 3 elements are, when looking for these 3 elements, I think that's how we find the right people to build that culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that element of trust, it almost always comes back to that, doesn't it? It's, that trust is something that you need to show when you're trying to raise that initial investment, but that's also what you need to see when you're building that team, so you're able to hand over those responsibilities and build that together. for sure. And through your career journey, I know you've spoken about it so far. Have there been any moments in particular where there have been key learns, and if so, what were they?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there have been several kind of key learnings. So maybe one interesting moment was really in the beginning of Exogene, when we had just hired our first two lab scientists, first two employees. And it turned out that one of them was intensely bullying the other scientists. And as soon as we found out, we essentially decided to fire the bully. And we did it pretty swiftly. This person, let's say the bully, was, this person had a family, they had kids, they had this was the first time I was hiring and firing someone, and I saw the whole picture. And to be honest, I did lose a lot of sleep over that. However, I was very, very happy that we made that decision, because the other employee that then stayed with us turned out to be an absolute rock star. And we built a very deep kind of relationship around trust. And I think because of that, she really also flourished. So this was a really great learning for me. Like being able to navigate these hard choices that, however, are necessary and really, really important to kind of lock down.
No, and that's it's really interesting to hear, and it's something I've heard a lot of people who have had to found companies and build something from a startup, that those hard decisions, they're so impactful on what is to come in your business and what it flourishes into in the future as well. And staying on the theme of kind of these key learning points as you as an entrepreneur and scientist, have there been any other kind of key learnings or points since then that have helped you kind of guide Exogene? Obviously, biotech is an environment where you have to be particularly agile, and things comes up, then you have to change.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think one key learning on the fundraising for me has been to just, again, keep an open mind and be curious, because there's the traditional fundraising path, which is, like seed funding, Series A, so on and so forth. And this is great when money is easily and readily available. However, of course, as you mentioned, I mean, we're still in a biotech bear market. And especially for preclinical biotechs, VC dollars are pretty scarce and difficult to come by. So I think we have done really well in securing a lot of government grants. So UK government grants, and also pharma revenue. So we managed to secure 6 government grants from Innovate UK, and also pharma revenue in the low 6 figures. And these two things, not only did they extend our runway, but we continuously managed to improve our AI and technology platform to build better assets. So these were kind of two birds with one stone, and it's not like it's not a traditional kind of path, especially having so many grants when you're such a small company. So this was something that we weren't expecting that would be necessary, but then again, by keeping an open mind, we found these alternative avenues for funding.
Sure. And does that affect how you kind of strategize the next 6 months, next 12 months, given that that's kind of the way you're moving forward with your funding, opposed to a more traditional route when biotech's in a more flourishing market?
Well, I think the way we structure these things is that, I mean, all the money we spend needs to bring us closer to our near-term near-term inflection point of producing a data set for an asset that we want to partner. And also, it needs to bring us closer to the vision. If these two things are not happening, then we need to rethink our strategy. And it can be easy to get distracted. That's true. But I think we do a pretty good job now of kind of staying the course.
Okay, and that must be quite a challenging balance to strike between having that element of curiosity and open-mindedness and ask questions and move things forwards, but equally go, right, these are our two criteria that we need to strike in order to be able to move things forward.
I think it can. You always, I think we've learned that it's just really important to know, okay, ultimately, our main source of value and revenue will be the assets.
Yep.
And everything else is should be kind of enabling factors to develop better assets, move closer to the vision. If you see that in that framework, then usually it works out pretty well.
Right. And I know we've spoken an awful lot now about kind of the lessons you've had to overcome and the challenges you've overcome and all the things you've learned throughout your career so far. If you were to give some advice to your younger self, or maybe someone who's just finished GCSEs or A-levels and is thinking, oh, what would a life in R&D and biotech look like? What would be your key piece of advice to them?
That's a good question. So I think what I would say is, remember, try to always go for opportunities that maximize impact, your personal growth, and your upside. Like it's important to remember that whether you go into pharma, a CRO, or a large biotech or small biotech, you should always try to find the opportunities that enable you to grow as much as possible in a supportive environment, and ideally also have some kind of financial upside.
So, kind of coming towards the end now, tell me what's next for Exogene. What are your plans moving forward now? How do you see the future?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say we are now building something pretty massive in terms of let's say and there will be an announcement hopefully in the beginning of next year, which will represent something pretty transformational for us and hopefully the wider community. And
exciting.
We're very, very excited about that. So stay tuned.
Okay. Is there, again, I wouldn't be doing justice if I didn't dig a little further. Is there any inklings you can give us at this point?
Not a huge amount. What I can say is that it involves AI and it involves pharma companies.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Exciting. I'm sure that'll keep everyone on their toes. Well, look, from kind of the conversation so far, I can see the excitement that you've had throughout your career, the amount of emphasis that you put on curiosity, asking those questions, and almost having a kind of a simply just do it attitude. And I think that's something that people will certainly take away from the podcast today. I wish you all the very best in the future with Exogene. It sounds very exciting. You've got me on the edge of my seat. So I'll be listening soon. But yeah, do you have any kind of last words to say before we finish up?
Maybe just one word to candidates. Remember that despite the biotech market being down, despite what you read in the news globally, and the UK and the West. I mean, we are in a moment with quite low unemployment rates, and so rather than focusing so much on job security, I really would encourage people listening to the podcast to grab opportunities that maximize your growth, impact, and upside.
Fantastic. That's a great way to finish. Thanks for coming on to the podcast, Federico.
Thank you so much, Tyler.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe and share it with someone else you think will benefit. And for more podcasts, videos, blogs, and insights, come follow me, Tom Froggatt, on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Medium, or TikTok. See you next time.